to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Today is Wednesday, December 12th, 2024. We have a waxing gibbous moon in the sky. I happen to know that it's waxing quite well because it is very much in my line of sight tonight. Hope everybody's been doing well. I know it's been a little bit since we last talked. We had the special 40th episode, which ended up getting rave reviews, which I'm quite happy about. And it's been a little bit quiet since. I took the week with the holidays and everything. I had a little bit of time off, spent it with my wife and family, and I'm doing very well. Happy to be back with you guys, feeling relaxed and rejuvenated and ready to get back into things. So I have been busy on the astronomy front. I've actually, I got really lucky last new moon. I can't remember the last time I had so many great nights in a row with just zero troubles. I even made it out to the observatory a couple times, went out to another dark sky location this past weekend. Not as dark as the observatory, but I didn't have enough time to drive all the way down. So I went to a location that's a little bit closer. It's actually it's a pretty cool spot. It's this old Civil War graveyard. I know you guys probably think I'm nuts. I always go to graveyards to do astronomy, but they're good places a lot of the time. So there's a reason for that. But anyway, this particular spot is a Civil War graveyard from God way back when. It's a historical landmark, and it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And if you look at the headstones and stuff, you can see that some of these people literally died fighting in the Civil War. So kind of nuts. Very, very historical. Always fun to visit. And I've been to that place, God, since I was a little boy. I remember my mom taking me out there, and our neighbor was hiding in the bushes, and he scared the living crap out of me and my brother. I think that was the first time that I ever went there, and have been there a million times since. But the reason that we were there last Saturday was I wanted to make a first attempt at something that I've been wanting to do forever, but for whatever reason just haven't gotten around to. And that would be a very, very long exposure. Sorry, I was zoning out for a second there because one of my tracks was still playing in the background apparently. But anyway, a very wide, long exposure of the Orion constellation. So when I say wide, I mean like the super wide view that gives you, all of Barnards Loop, and obviously the Orion Nebula, all of the belt, basically the entire constellation of Orion, and then a lot of the area that is surrounding it. So in order to get such a shot, you really need to be shooting at that, super wide for astrophotography type level, which, in my case ended up being 35 millimeters. I actually initially thought I would go in at 50, but when I found the framing that I liked, it was 35. So I ended up sticking with that all night. And I used my nicest lens, which is my 24-70 RFL f2.8 lens. It's a great lens for astrophotography because it just gets, pin sharp stars, which I definitely appreciate. And it does really well, even wide open. Although I do tend to stop it down to f3.5 or f4, depending on what the conditions are like on any given night. I'll stop it down a little bit just because obviously it sharpens up quite a bit in the corners the more you stop it down. And we're not talking about an astrograph here. So there's going to be, chromatic aberration and what have you that you have to deal with anytime you're doing astrophotography with just a regular digital camera. But I basically, I had the R5 with that lens, the 24-70, on top of my Skyguider Pro, which is just a right ascension only star tracker, as I'm sure many of you know. And I ended up exposing for a couple of hours on Orion. I ended up processing it the day after, because I was dying to see the data, I remember. And I ended up with a little over an hour of like really good, clean, usable subs. So I ended up stacking those. And I was really impressed with just an hour's worth of data with no filter whatsoever. And mind you, a not Astro modified camera. And in case you're wondering what an astro-modified camera is, that's a process where you basically remove some of the built-in filters from a mirrorless camera or a DSLR. Typically like a UV IR cut filter is removed. And it allows us to pick up a lot more of the wanted signals in that area of light, such as like the hydrogen alpha, the reds that are very prominent in our universe, in our night sky. Those tend to show up a lot better with an astro-modded camera versus a stock one. So I tell you all this because I had a couple of people saying that you couldn't even get Barnards Loop without an astro-modified camera or a dedicated astrophotography camera, obviously. I was able to get Barnards Loop quite well in that photo. Now, it's not like a photo that I would make a giant print of or anything, but the fact of the matter is it showed up quite well with just 1 hour's worth of exposure. So you can definitely get a lot of Orion and all of the surrounding nebulosity with a very, very simple setup. I mean, if I were so inclined, I could have even taken shorter exposures and then just manually tracked Orion through the night if I just had it on a tripod head. Then I certainly could have done that. If we use the 500 rule, which is basically you take your focal length and you take 500 and divide it by your focal length. So in my case, I was shooting at 35 millimeters and I was doing 30-second exposures. I know I could have got longer, but I didn't have an intervalometer, so I was just using the built-in exposures with Canon. Anyway, at 35 millimeters, if I were to use that 500 rule on a full frame camera, it's the 300 rule if you're using a crop sensor, then I should be able to take 14-second exposures without running into any trailing stars. So I say all that to tell you, if you ever want to get a really pretty photo of Orion and you don't have a lot of gear, but you do have a camera, you could certainly set it up, take photos, 15 seconds or 14 seconds each if you're using a full frame camera, probably closer to 9 seconds on a APS-C sensor. But if you were to do that and just manually move the camera to, keep a particular star centered in the frame, you could certainly within an hour get enough exposure to bring out, Barnard's Loop and then a lot of the other really cool nebula that are in the area. Actually, I was able to pick up a little bit of the Witch Head Nebula. It shows up quite faintly in the background. And overall, like I say, I'm pretty happy with the photo. All things considered, I wish I could have gotten a lot more exposure time. That's kind of my only regret on this one is it was freezing cold out that night. And, it was kind of spur of the moment. Me and my buddy just headed out there because it was clear skies and we wanted to, check out Orion. So we ended up doing just that, had a great evening, relaxing under the stars, watching shooting stars fall and just catching up on old times, which is always a fun thing to do. Now, I know a lot of folks listened to last week's episode and are probably curious about what all that means for the future of the show. And obviously, our regular format isn't going anywhere. I'm still talking to you one-on-one as per usual, but I am going to try to make it a point to I'm aiming for once a month. I don't know if realistically that will happen every month yet, just because we're all very busy and we need to figure out a schedule that will work for us and all those sorts of things. But after we iron the kinks out, I would love to have a group episode format like that at least once a month. I know Rick and Jeff bring a whole lot of knowledge to the subject, particularly if you want to hear about stuff back in the day. I want to hear a lot more about that, how they used to guide, how they used to expose with foam cameras and those sorts of things. And they have the kind of connections to, make those conversations happen for us. So we'll definitely be hearing a lot more from Rick and Jeff in the future, as well as Ricky for that matter, because he was great to have as well on the show. So you guys can certainly look forward to that as well in the coming near future. So we got Jupiter at opposition currently. So it's supposed to be at its absolute brightest part of the year right now. So Jupiter being at opposition basically means that it's as far away from the sun as it can get. And when that happens, it does make it appear as bright as possible in our night sky. And so during this time, it looks like Jupiter is at magnitude minus 2.8. It makes it the fourth brightest object in the sky after the sun, moon, and planet Venus. But, thinking about it, I'm pretty sure it's always the fourth brightest object in the night sky after the sun, moon, and planet Venus. But nonetheless, it is apparently a bit brighter. I don't know, maybe if you get your binoculars out, you can, get a better view of the Galilean moons perhaps than you otherwise would. But generally speaking, in my experience, they're fun things to know, but I don't personally ever notice much of a difference. Like when we have super moons, for example, I can't ever tell that the moon is supposed to look bigger. But I do like, knowing these little factoids about astronomy. It's still fun to know where the planets are in relation to us when we look up at them in the night sky. Sometimes when we're just standing out there under, a wide open night sky, when you got a really good big view and it's really dark where you are, you can really get that sense of just sort of floating through space and, having points of reference like Jupiter that's, always rising in the east just after dark now, and very bright. It'll actually be in Taurus, in case you're curious. Should be like right near Aldebaran this time of year, or this time of the month, I should say. Which is by the Hyades, which is right by the Pleiades. So if you know Taurus, Aldebaran is a lot of people think of it as the eye of the bull, the really bright orange star that's just a few degrees east of the Pleiades. And that little area, that little V shape that I always think of as the bull's horns personally, but I know that they're not. That would be known as the Hyades, and Jupiter will be right beside the Hyades for quite a while here in mid-December, with the full moon showing up around the 15th. So yeah, we're just a few days away from yet another full moon ruining our beautiful imaging evenings. Speaking of beautiful imaging evenings, I have been getting that R5 out more and shooting it more often. And it's funny because getting this wide field shot of Orion really is kind of my big goal of this winter season. And I realized last week, I suppose, that it's going to be kind of difficult for me to actually make this happen the way that I would like to. Because I actually have a Canon R5 and R7, as many longtime listeners of the show will know. And because of that, I am in a mirrorless camera system, which means most of the nice lenses that I own are RF mount lenses. And those are focus by wire lenses and also electronically controlled apertures. So stopping up and stopping down the lens requires an electronic connection. And when you stop and think about it, you say you can't connect a ZWO camera to one of these RF mount lenses because they do not have that electrical connection that you have between the lens and the sensor. If you ever look at a lens on the back of everything except a completely manual lens, there will generally be little contact pads that connect where your lens mounts directly to your camera. And because we do not have that option with a ZWO camera, I can't really use my RF lenses with a true Astro camera. So that kind of leaves me with a lot less options. I could go with a older EF lens if I wanted to, because I actually have that Canon EF mount adapter that ZWO makes. But I would think that would only be practical for, fully manual lenses like the Rokinon 14. I don't know if I could find a good quality lens solution in the 35 to 50 millimeter range that will work with that camera. If you guys can think of one, maybe I'm overthinking this. Please let me know. You can email me at ruastrocast@gmail.com, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. We've actually had quite a few people write in as of late. We had a listener by the name of Kelly actually write in not too long ago, and she was talking about getting into astrophotography and was listening to one of our very early episodes where we were talking about a good kit to start with for a beginner friendly kit. And we actually talked back and forth a little bit. And I believe we pretty much arrived on the same type of recommendations that I would do for a beginner kit as I did, earlier this year, which basically amounts to something like a Star Adventure GTI for a mount. If you've got more money to spend on the mount, then obviously you would spend more. But like I say, starting with a go-to mount at a minimum, I feel like is going to just do you a whole world of good in this hobby, because you can get pretty frustrated quite quickly without having that go-to functionality. Right off the bat when you're learning. It's extremely helpful to have. And then as you get more and more comfortable in the hobby, then maybe you pick up something like a right ascension only star tracker for when you want to go out and do crazy wide field shots like I was doing the other night. But she ended up going with a Astro modified camera that was on Cloudy Nights forum, which is an awesome place. If you don't know, Cloudy Nights is a really great forum website for astronomers and astrophotographers, but they also have an excellent classified section where people can buy, sell, and trade gear. And that is always a good place to look because the prices are always reasonable. And I've only had good luck buying from people there. Obviously, you can see that they've made sales before, and you can make sure that it's not like some first timer trying to scam you. I believe they've got quite a few rules in place to prevent that kind of thing from happening. So if you are looking for your first setup, or, maybe you're just looking to pick up a secondary rig or something along that line, don't forget to check the classifieds because they can be extremely affordable in comparison to going out and buying all new gear. In particular, if you're maybe in a situation where you're wanting to get a secondary rig and you're kind of dipping your toes into different areas, maybe you're like me and you want to do ultra wide field astrophotography. That might be a good time to look into getting a Astro modified mirrorless camera. So anyway, I say all that to work my way back to astro converting cameras. I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I could probably go out and buy, a decent EF lens in that 35 to 50 millimeter range that would work if I could find like a manual only lens, which I'm sure I can in the EF mount, that I could hook up with my ASI 294 MC Pro. But I've been thinking more and more about possibly doing the conversion on my R5. So my only worry or concern is that I still will be able to use it as a regular, terrestrial photography camera. That was really kind of my big concern. But after I started looking into it, it looks like most of the reputable places that do these conversions actually will include a pop-in filter that you can put in behind the lens, like directly in front of the shutter, that will allow you to still use it for your regular photography. So, if that is indeed the case, and I've been reading this correctly, then I very well may go that route because it looks like they will do the conversion for, just a couple $100, which is a pretty reasonable price. But I need to do a little bit more research. Obviously, my camera is my baby, and I would be crushed if anything ever happened to it. So I definitely won't just be sending it into, just old anyone to start taking apart and tinkering with. But if I can find a really reputable place to do it, then I am certainly considering that, because I figure by the time I, spend all that money getting an extra lens and getting it to work with, my existing gear and that sort of thing, I could just probably get my my R5 modified and be super happy with it, because it's a great camera. It just needs to be able to, get that extra nebulosity. And I was thinking about it. if I could do that, I could also use my RF 800, my giant lens, and I could use that to shoot galaxies a little bit in the springtime. I know that, like, you know, obviously galaxies being dim and that being an f11 lens, it's not going to be great, but it might be fun just to look at, you know, see what I can capture. And it gives me a much further reach than the 445 millimeters that my current big scope, the 80 millimeter doublet does. If you put it on the R7 with the 1.6x crop factor, if you don't know what that means, crop sensor cameras tend to have a more zoomed in looking view than a full frame camera because the sensor is actually smaller. Technically speaking, if you had a full frame and a APS-C shot of the same image using the same lenses, the picture with taking with the APS-C lens would be the exact same content as the other photo. There would just be less of it because it would be literally cropped out around the image. But anyway, I digress. I say that because the R7 with that 800 millimeter lens, I think gives you like 1340 effective focal length, if I'm not mistaken. It's over 1300 millimeters, which is a heck of a lot more reach than the, you know, 480 that I get. So I'm considering just messing around with that too. Maybe get the CM26 out one night and throw the Canon with the giant beast lens on there and see what can happen. To me, like, some of the most fun that I have with astrophotography is just experimenting and seeing what I can come up with. Like you say, I know that an f11 lens is not the best thing to shoot a galaxy with, but can I? You know what I mean? That's what I wonder. Can I shoot a galaxy with it? Can I maybe get a decent photo with it? It's just like people said to me a couple weeks ago that it would be impossible to shoot Barnards Loop with my unmodified R5, and I shouldn't even bother. But I drove 25 minutes outside of the city to a Bortle 5 light zone, which isn't great, but it's better than my house by a mile. And within an hour, I was able to get Barnards Loop. So I just look at it as a challenge and something else to give a try to, and something I definitely always enjoy doing. So we do have the Geminid meteor shower is going to be peaking on the 14th. It's not going to be a great time for it this year, though, just because of the full moon being out on the 15th. It's probably going to be a bit of a wash if we're being real. I'm sure that you could still see quite a few if you I don't know, go out late in the, because let's see, they emanate from Gemini, which is, Pollux and Castor, and those are coming up just shortly after dark right now in the Northern Hemisphere, along, with the moon being just probably 25 degrees or so, maybe 40 away from it. So, you can kind of figure it's going to be a lot of moonlight washing out the Geminids this year. And that seems to have been the case for the last couple of years. It seems like we've had full moons or nearly full moons around most of the good meteor showers, but hopefully that means next year things will be a little bit better. But, that being said, 2024 has without a doubt been one of the best astronomy years that we have had, and God knows how long. If you think about all of the crazy events that we were able to witness this year, I mean, being able to see a naked eye comet, being able to see the northern lights as far south as Key West, and, some say even further. I heard Puerto Rico. There has been a lot of remarkable events this year in the astronomical world, and the technology continues to get better and better. We're seeing the release of new smart telescope from ZWO. Everyone knows I am not a big fan of the smart telescopes. I know I've said this a million times, but I just don't like them because you don't learn anything when you use one. And I know I'm a hypocrite for saying that because I use an ASI Air, but I didn't always use an ASI Air. When I first started learning, I had a Newtonian on an alt-az mount that I had to do a 3-star alignment with to figure it out. And I know even that could be cheating if you come from the older days when you had a copy of Turn Left at Orion and you just star hopped to find your way around. And I think everything up to and including using a smart telescope is still valid astronomy. Like, don't get me wrong, you are still absolutely practicing astronomy and astrophotography. I feel like you're selling yourself short on a lot of it because there's so much knowledge to be gathered from learning how to do things like star hop or read a star chart or learn how right ascension actually works in declination and learning polar alignment and drift alignments and all these different techniques. They all add up to a much more fulfilling experience, in my opinion. But that being said, I do like that it's opening up the hobby to a whole world of people that would otherwise be unable to afford astrophotography. Because the one thing about this hobby is it is still prohibitively costly to enter into, and I hate that because I really do want everybody to be able to enjoy the hobby, but I realize that not everyone is in that same station of life where they can afford to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a whole new setup. So devices like the new C-Star, $300, and you can image Andromeda. It's really hard to argue with that because that's something that I feel like is attainable, at least for most people, if not entirely affordable. Certainly attainable if you're, willing to save a little bit of money here and there and just, work hard and save your money. You can get one. But again, I will say it, if you're going to really save your money, save for just a little bit longer and get yourself a proper mount with a go-to function and guiding capabilities and all this. Although I will say, I think they come with the solar filters as well. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the C-Stars do. Okay, so yes, it does come with a solar filter. I was just checking on their site. So yeah, $350 for that new S30. And it's funny because I remember trying to do let's see if we can build a rig for the same cost as a C-Star. And we kind of got there if we were willing to, stretch a few definitions here and there about what constitutes, equal gear. But I don't know. Really, it's kind of unbeatable at this point, paying, $500 or less to get something that can image nebula, let you view the sun, and even uses a terrestrial, telephoto camera if you'd like to do that. It's kind of funny. I was watching one of the YouTube channels that I like to watch where they review tech. It's Austin Evans, if you've ever seen his channel. He's a pretty famous tech YouTuber, but he actually had one of the new Vaonis telescopes on his channel recently, and God bless them, they had no idea what they were doing with a telescope, and they certainly weren't ready to, point it at the night sky. It was the middle of the day when they broke it out, and I believe they were like, well, let's see if we can see something far away. So like pointed it at a tree or something like that, and they kind of complained about the image not being great. Austin ended up taking it home supposedly overnight, and he said the best photo that he could get was this really crummy, blurry photo of the moon. And I'm not sure, it was the Hestia, I believe is the name of the scope that he was using. And it was basically one where you line up your smartphone's camera on top of it, and then I guess it feeds you the directions through an app, I would imagine. I'm not entirely certain how those work, but just the fact that you have to use your smartphone's camera lens probably doesn't bode well for it as a device. But I do wonder if maybe, him not taking it seriously as an astrophotography machine and, properly setting it up and everything played any role in that, or if he was just kind of like, I don't know how to make this work, screw it, and decided to just take the crummy picture of the moon. Yeah, so looking over the Vaonis Hestia review page here on skiesandscopes.com, I'm going to say Austin probably had it right. This is not a smart telescope, and it looks like it's just kind of for all intents and purposes, a lens that you use with your smartphone, because it doesn't have any sort of tracking built into it whatsoever. It's really just an optical system that goes with your smartphone. But the problem is the aperture is only 30 millimeters. So with that small of an aperture and no built-in guiding, no smart telescope features whatsoever, I can't imagine that you're going to be able to get very much with a device like this. So I guess the advantage is that it's really cheap. But again, with the C-Star S30 coming out and being $350, I don't think a device like this is really going to be able to compare, unfortunately. So it's $300, comes with a tripod, which I guess is nice. Doesn't look like a great tripod, but again, no smart anything built in, really just kind of a fancy lens for your phone from what I can tell. It does come with an app that you can use to, help locate objects, kind of like any of your, astronomy apps that you use to track things in the night sky. If you've ever used Celestron's app that helps you point like a Dobsonian at a particular star in the night sky, I'm sure it's quite similar to that. But again, no built-in tracking, so you can't really truly capture deep sky images, which would normally be done by tracking them and stacking them on top of each other and then using whatever kind of computational wizardry smart telescopes do in the background to, reduce noise and bring out detail and that sort of thing. But yeah, I'm going to say you got it right on this one, Austin. I was initially judging you saying, this guy's just a tech YouTuber. He's not an astronomer. He doesn't know what he's doing. But after looking over the review of this particular device, I'm going to say you pretty much, you nailed it in your review there, my friend. I forgot to mention earlier too. I wanted to mention if you guys know of any really good reputable folks who will do the conversion on my R5, I'd certainly like to know about that. So if you have any recommendations, please feel free to send them over to ruastrocast@gmail.com. And while I'm thinking of it, I just want to take a moment to thank all of our Patreon supporters for continually donating to help support the Astrocast. If you would like to join our Patreon and get access to the members only Discord where we're always chatting about something astronomy related, feel free to donate at patreon.com/the Astrocast. And as per usual, I will have a link to the Patreon in the show notes if you'd like to check it out there. So thank you so much to our Patreon supporters once again. I think I want to get to a place where I'm more comfortable using my Star Adventure GTI by itself without an ASI Air. So hear me out here. I have been using the Skyguider Pro quite often, with the wide field type shots that I use. But if I could use just my Star Adventure GTI, then I could set it to dither and right ascension or declination. And basically what I'm getting at is if you may or may not remember, a few months back, I was able to rig up my R5 to work on the Star Adventure GTI by using a dovetail bar that was sideways, and I mounted the guide scope on the one side and then the R5 on the other side and balanced it as well as I can. And I managed to get it to work, but it was kind of a nightmare because I forgot to use a dummy battery. I was using a real battery. The battery died, and then I had to take the whole thing apart to get a new one in there. But anyway, I wanted to kind of revisit that idea. And I actually found a much smaller guide camera than the one that I am currently using. It's going to be a 30 millimeter guide camera, which should help reduce the overall size quite a bit for the actual guiding setup. And then directly behind that will be the R5, and I've actually got a rotatable collar for it now. So it's basically kind of like a Vixen dovetail that has a circle on top of it, like, the rings that hold your telescope. But you can lock and unlock that, and you can rotate the Canon R5 within that collar. So that way, if I need to frame something up in a particular way, I will be able to do it, which was the only reason why I didn't do it more often was, due to framing. I want to be able to frame the shot up just how I want it. And now that I have that collar, I should be able to do that. So I'm going to give that a try again. I don't know that I'll even need to use guiding, to be honest, but I do need to start dithering, because I did notice whenever I was using the Sky Guider Pro to shoot that wide field Orion shot over last weekend, after I stacked everything and was, messing about in post, unfortunately, I had a lot of walking noise in between each of the images, and walking noise looks terrible, and it's kind of hard to remove in post if you're dealing with it. So there's a lot of ways that you can negate that walking noise. A lot of people will do what they call manual dithering if you're on like a right ascension only star tracker. And that's essentially where you literally nudge the camera a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, every 5 to 10 shots or so. So the noise is getting picked up in a different pattern, and not just constantly laying down that, same noisy signal over and over again. And that's something I could certainly think about doing. I haven't read up to see, because I know, like, for example, with the ASI Air, I think you have to have guiding set up in order to dither, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm pretty sure it's under the guiding advanced settings where the dithering is. I could be wrong about that, but I've heard that you can dither without guiding, and I probably need to look into whether or not I can do that with the Star Adventure GTI by itself, because ultimately what I would love to be able to do is just bring the GTI and a camera with me, because I know that there is an app that you can use from your phone to control the GTI for like go-tos and what have you. And now that I have got that 90-degree polar scope eyepiece that I can pop onto the back of it, I can really quickly polar align. I actually love using that thing, by the way. If you've got a polar scope, if you're like me and you still use a polar scope occasionally because you don't always want to use an ASI Air, there's a device that you can buy for, I think I paid like $30-40 for mine on Amazon. It's, one of those things you can kind of get anywhere. But anyway, it's a 90-degree elbow that connects directly to the eyepiece of your guide scope. And the reason I did that was because I've got a bad left knee, and if I put it down on the ground, I will be in pain for like 3 days afterwards. So, squatting down to look through my polar scope can be quite painful. And therefore, I just get that elbow, and then I can just kind of look directly down in the eyepiece as if I was, viewing a telescope visually, is more akin to what I'm doing than looking through a polar scope on my knees. And it made life a lot easier for me, and made polar scope or polar aligning via a polar scope a lot more of an enjoyable experience that doesn't take long at all. So Polaris is so bright, and that polar scope is so wide that it really stands out. You won't even really see the dimmer stars unless you're in a very, very, very dark area, which I'm usually not. And you can, pull out your polar scope app on Android or iOS and just, look and see what time the star is supposed to be on the clock, and then do your polar alignment. I mean, I can get it done a lot quicker than I can with an ASI Air, generally speaking, because I can physically move the mount until I can center it up directly under Polaris. And then it's really just a matter of dealing with the altitude knob, so up or down, until I get close enough to Polaris to where I can see it, and then I can just make the fine tune adjustments while looking through the hole there. So anyway, if you do polar align, check out one of those 90-degree elbows. I'll see if I can put it in the show notes for you if you're interested in getting one. So on the opposite end of affordable astronomy is incredibly unaffordable astronomy gear. And I was kind of curious to see, how the other half lives. So I pulled up on B&H a few minutes ago. I was looking, and I saw them advertising a ZWO camera that was going for over $12,000. And that would be the ZWO ASI 461 MM Pro. So it's an astronomy as denoted by the MM. But this is actually a medium format sensor. So it's a 100 megapixel Sony IMX 461 sensor. and medium format being 44 by 33 millimeters, as opposed to the 35 millimeters of full frame. Actually, full frame 35 by 24. So yeah, so 44 by 33 for medium format versus 35 or 36 by 24 for a full frame camera. So you're talking about a very, very significantly larger sensor. And it actually cools to, get this, 95 degrees below ambient temperature. So you talk about really, really cooling your camera. I'd say 95 below would certainly do it. And then the resolution that this camera can spit out in mono, mind you, is 11,600 by 8,750 with no amp glow. So it's got two-stage coolers that lowers it to 95 below ambient. So it's going to get rid of any kind of dark current noise and leave you with just a really, really clean image. So if anyone's got 13 grand, just burning a hole in their pocket, that might be a way that you could spend it. What else is there to say? I mean, good Lord, a $13,000 medium format mono camera. I wonder what kind of filters you would need to use for that, because let's see here. If it's 44 by 33 millimeters, yeah, I'm not even sure how you'd make that work with like a filter wheel and that sort of thing. I suppose you'd have to get unmounted filters, because I don't think a 2-inch filter would work, would it? I don't think so. I guess 2 inches is about 50 millimeters, but that would be across a circle, and you're talking about a rectangular sensor. I don't know. I'm guessing unmounted filters, but I don't know if you'd use like a filter drawer situation. If I have any listeners with a medium format cooled astronomy camera, please let me know. I would love to hear about your experiences with it. In fact, send me a photo if you want. astrocast@gmail.com. I know we've got a lot of different people listening from all walks of life, so I'm always curious if we have anybody out there who's lucky enough to have that sort of setup. Whether you bought it yourself or fell into it through inheritance, I know that happens a lot of times with really good astronomy gear. I would be quite curious to know. I'd say the real steal of the holiday season has probably been the fact that the 2600 MC Pro has been going for about $1,300 since, Black Friday, I want to say, is when they started the sale. I know that they've got it on for a little while longer, and I think all of the major astronomy places have that same ZWO deal. We do partner with High Point Scientific. If you'd ever like to purchase anything through our affiliate link, that's another good way that you can help support the show if you would like to. But yeah, if I was going to make a suggestion to somebody this holiday season who was looking to get a good deal on something, you can't beat that price for the 2600 MC Pro. I am super tempted to get one, but I need to pay off my last round of goodie buying before I even think about getting another. But very, very tempting at that $1,350 price point. I can't justify it because I don't know yet if the next camera that I get is going to be mono. I don't know if I'm going to have my observatory yet. I don't know if it's going to be down at the observatory or in my backyard, or there's too many ifs up in the air right now. They're going to be settled come springtime for me to buy another camera right now. God knows I've got enough of them floating around. But if I could get that R5 Astro modified, I think that would satiate my hunger enough to keep the gear demon at bay for maybe one more year or so before I have to go through and buy at least an APS-C cooled sensor camera, because having the 294 MC Pro is great, but knowing what I know about photography now, I know that an APS-C would be a million times better, and full frame would be even better. But then you're talking kind of ridiculously expensive, getting into that, $3,000 and up range for full frame. And I'm not willing to go there quite yet because my skills do not do not qualify me for needing a full frame camera yet in astrophotography. I suppose my R5 gives me a full frame camera that I can use in astrophotography, but I do wonder though if I'd be able to get a lot more detail with something like a ZWO camera or a QHY that was a full frame and meant to pick up all that signal that my R5 cannot, for now at least. All right, guys, so I'm going to make a little bit of a different kind of recommendation this week. And it's different because I actually have not checked it out yet. I found the trailer for it last night. My brother had actually sent me a different trailer for a different show, but it got me thinking, and I did a little bit of a search, and I was able to find this show. It's called Orb, O-R-B, on the movements of Earth. And if you haven't guessed, it is an anime actually about astronomy. And it is somewhat based on the actual historical events from what I understand. They don't actually use the same names for characters, but you have characters like Galileo, for example, that are portrayed in the show. And then you also obviously have the church going after him. And from what I understand, it's supposed to be a pretty good show about astronomy in anime form. So that's pretty much all that I know about it right now. I do know that it is a Japanese only voice situation. So if you're someone who prefers dubs over subs, then this might not be the one for you. But if you don't mind reading and listening to another language for a little bit, it might be worth checking out. I'm going to watch at least the first episode this week, and then we can report back on next week's episodes with my findings. I'll let you know if I love it, if I hate it, if you should definitely check it out, or maybe if there's another show that is worth checking out, because my brother actually sent me a different anime that is apparently about astronomy. And I don't know why, but Orb seemed to catch my eye a little bit more in the review video that I saw. So maybe I'll check that other one out too and see how it looks. But that's gonna just about do it for us this week, guys. Super glad to be back. Super happy to be catching back up with everybody. We will be back to our regular schedule, releasing on Tuesdays or Wednesdays starting next week. Like I say, it just kind of depends on how the week goes as far as release dates go right now. But generally speaking, I will always try to be out on a Tuesday or Wednesday, with the odd weekend release always lurking in the rear view mirror, depending on what holiday is up next, because on Christmas week it's hard to get things out with the holidays going on and everything. So just keep that in mind as we move through the holiday season, but I'll always do my best to get it out on time for you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in this week. I just want to take a moment and thank our partners over at Dark Dragons Astronomy. If you haven't heard yet, the Astrocast is actually partnering with Dark Dragons Astronomy moving forward, and they are an amazing company. So if you or anybody that you know needs help with a roll-off roof observatory, and they do actually have a full system for controlling a roll-off roof. And if you want to hear all about that, check out our last episode, episode 40. But they are your guys. So if you need help on getting your observatory roof situation under control, please feel free to reach out to them. Rick and Jeff are the owners and co-founders of the company, both good friends of mine. And just great people who really do what they do for the love of astronomy and nothing more. So that is going to do it for us this week, folks. I'm your host, Rue. You have been listening to the Astrocast, and as always, clear skies.